Hi, my name's Claire Turnbull and I'm a history teacher at Putteridge High School in Luton. Just wanted to share with you today a couple of teaching and learning strategies which we use in the history department, which we found to be really successful. One of them is called guided reading, and the other one is called I do, we do, you do, which is a strategy for introducing new exam questions and ensuring students can answer them successfully. Lots of the ideas are taken from the history community on Twitter, which is wonderful if you're not on Twitter. And if that's the case, then I've left the teacher's Twitter handle on the slide. So you can go and follow them if you wish for some more ideas. So the first one that I'm going to share with you is the guided reading, and this came from Simon Beale, SP Beale, who also runs with Andrew Sweet the History Teachers Book Club, which is fantastic for engaging with scholarship, and I'm also a part of. So guided reading is a simple idea that is important for promoting literacy across the curriculum, but also for ensuring students engage successfully with some text. So this could be anything. This could be an article from a magazine. This could be information from the textbook. It could be from a historian's book. And essentially, the piece of text goes in the middle of the page. Students are asked to read it and highlight just about 4 words per paragraph, or as little as possible. On the left-hand side, they're asked to give it a title, and on the right-hand side, to summarise the information into a sentence. And the idea of that is that they're able to understand the text, they can show their understanding, and they've engaged with it carefully. It can lead into further discussions and explanations. So that example there is just using some information from the textbook on magic bullets. But in my second example here, this is from a book called Wounded, which is an amazing book. I read all about the journey home for wounded soldiers from the First World War and the different stages of treatment, which is something that we teach in the medicine unit at GCSE as part of the historic environment. So again, I've got the text, I've got the highlighting, the paragraph title, and then summarising it into a sentence. But at the bottom, you'll also notice that I've put 2 key questions asking them to explain the text further. And in the third example, something which is a new idea which I've just picked up on and I'm planning to adapt for as many units as possible, particularly medicine and Nazi Germany, as they both use sources, is the idea of the story, the source, and the scholarship. So on the left, you've got the guided reading element. On the top right, you've got 3 sources for the students to engage with and analyse. And then on the bottom right, you've got the scholarship. So you've got 2 interpretations from historians to engage with as well. And this really gives them a wider picture of how far the Night of the Long Knives gave Hitler total power in Germany by looking at the information from the textbook, by looking at some sources and analysing sources, being able to pick out the key content, and then also looking at the scholarship from other historians. So this is a brilliant resource that is certainly going to be adapted for lots of as many units as possible. The second idea then is the idea of I do, we do, you do, which came from the amazing Greg Thornton on Twitter, and which we've been using to help students to understand new questions, to introduce them, how to structure their responses. And it begins with deconstructing the question. So I put the question up on the slide, ask them to write the question down, and as they're doing it, I talk them through the question and ask them to annotate it with what they actually need to do. So you might have heard this referred to as bugging the question. My geography colleagues certainly call it that. And on the left-hand side, there you can see that I've boxed around explain, because that's the key thing they're being asked to do. That's the command word. And then the key element that they're being asked to explain is the similarities. They're making a comparison between people's responses to the plague in Britain in the 14th and 17th century. So they're making a comparison between those 2 centuries and people's responses to the plague, which they've got to explain. So that's the key question, which I've had up on the board and I've annotated, and they've written down and annotated their own. And then we move on and we talk about the 3 stages that we're going to use for writing the question. So the first one is looking at a worked paragraph or a waggle, what a good one looks like, and I'll model how to answer it. The second one is making some improvements, and then the third one is them having a go at writing it themselves. So in the first stage here, this is what a good one looks like. So this is a good example, a 4-mark example of a response that you could write to this question. So I would talk them through the fact that we've got first discussion of the 14th century, the Middle Ages, and their responses to the plague caused by the idea that the plague was caused by miasma. And in the second paragraph there, you'll notice that it says the reaction to the Great Plague in 1665 was similar. And I'll be pointing out to the students that this is using the wording from the question, so it's directly answering the question. And then that student goes on to explain how that response was similar during the Great Plague. We then talk about how many marks we think that response would get using the mark scheme and why, which gives them a better understanding of how to achieve those higher marks. Also, that this response only needs to be about 4 sentences long. It's only worth 4 marks. We don't spend long on it, and we don't write too much, even though we've got to show that detailed knowledge. In the second stage, then, I give them in groups on their tables a weaker response, and I'm asking them what they would keep, what they would build bin, and what they would build on. So they're highlighting what they would keep, they're crossing out what they would bin, and they're annotating what they would build on, what they would adapt in the answer. And they're usually able to point out that whilst this person has got really good knowledge and lots of examples, they've not actually made a comparison between the 2 periods at all. They've just written down everything that they know about responses to the plague. So whilst it might get a couple of marks, it's certainly not going to get the 4 marks. So they've been able to compare the two worked examples to see how they're gaining the most marks and structuring their response effectively. And in the third stage, then, using those ideas that we've discussed, they're writing their own response to the question themselves. So I've put a couple of pointers on the left-hand side to remind them to use the wording from the question, make their comparison, explain, etc. I've also put a couple of sentence starters on the bottom because this is the first time they're having a go. For those that are feeling a little bit less confident, it gives them a bit of a starting point to get going. And I've left the mark scheme up there for them to see as well. What we've found is that this gives students a really good basic understanding of exactly what it is that they need to do to achieve those marks and how to structure their response effectively. It also gives them confidence the next time that we answer one of those questions, they know how to answer the question because we've been through those different stages. So it works really well. Well, good luck if you're going to have a go at those strategies, and thank you for listening.